The text arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. We need to talk. Tomorrow. It's important. I stared at the screen, my stomach knotting. Derek and I had been together for 4 years, since sophomore year of college. We'd survived long study nights, family drama, and my obsession with landing a spot at a top consulting firm. I texted back, "Okay. Coffee at 9. He replied with a thumbs up emoji. No heart. No warmth. Just a digital acknowledgement that felt cold as winter glass. I set my phone down and tried to sleep, but my mind kept circling back to that message. The way it lacked his usual sweetness. The way it felt like a door closing. I pulled the blanket tighter, listening to the hum of traffic outside my apartment window. Something was ending. I could feel it in my bones. The coffee shop smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon. Derek sat by the window, fingers drumming against his cup. His jaw was tight, eyes avoiding mine. I slid into the chair across from him and forced a smile. "Hey," I said softly. He didn't smile back. Instead, he exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for hours. "Maya, I can't do this anymore," he said. My chest tightened. "Do what?" He looked at me then, his brown eyes flat and distant. Us. You're always working, always networking, always chasing the next achievement. I feel like I'm dating your career, not you." The words hit like a slap. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but he kept going. "You're too ambitious. You don't make time for us anymore. I need someone who's present." I sat there, frozen, watching him end everything we'd built. My throat burned. I didn't cry. I just nodded. He left before I could finish my coffee. I sat there for 20 minutes, staring at the foam dissolving into beige liquid. Around me, people laughed and typed on laptops, living ordinary mornings. Mine felt like it had shattered. I thought about all the late nights I'd spent preparing case studies while he watched movies alone. The dinners I'd skipped because of networking events. The weekend trip I'd cancelled to attend a seminar. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had chosen ambition over him. But what hurt most wasn't the breakup, it was the accusation. Too ambitious. Like wanting success was a character flaw. Like dreaming big made me less worthy of love. I stood up, threw my cup away, and walked back to my apartment. The city felt colder than usual. That night, I made a decision. If ambition was my crime, I'd own it completely. 3 months later, I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in business analytics. Derek wasn't there. His absence felt like a shadow during the ceremony, but I kept my head high. My mother hugged me afterward, tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, Maya," she whispered. I held on to those words. 2 weeks later, I received an offer from Catalyst Global, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the country. The salary was excellent. The opportunities were limitless. I accepted immediately. On my first day, I wore a navy suit and carried a leather portfolio my mother had gifted me. The office was sleek, glass walls, modern furniture, people who moved with purpose. I was assigned to the market expansion team under a senior partner named Victor Hayes. He was brilliant, demanding, and didn't tolerate mediocrity. I thrived under pressure. I stayed late, analyzed data until my eyes burned, and delivered reports that made Victor nod with approval. Slowly, I stopped thinking about Derek. A year passed. Then 2. I moved up quickly. Junior analyst to associate analyst to senior associate. My colleagues respected me. Clients requested me by name. I traveled to conferences, closed deals, and built a reputation as someone who delivered results. On quiet nights, I sometimes thought about Derek's words. Too ambitious. They didn't sting anymore. They felt like fuel. I bought a small apartment downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the skyline. I furnished it with minimalist furniture and plants I barely remembered to water. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. My mother visited once and cried again. "You've built something real," she said. I nodded, feeling proud but oddly hollow. Success tasted like victory, but sometimes it felt lonely. Still, I didn't regret my choices. I'd chosen myself over someone who couldn't support my dreams. That was enough. 3 years after the breakup, I was promoted to team lead. Victor called me into his office on a Tuesday morning. "Maya, you've earned this," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "You'll oversee recruitment, client relations, and strategic planning for the Northeast Division." I felt a surge of pride. At 25, I was one of the youngest team leads in the firm's history. That afternoon, I attended a leadership meeting where I'd help interview candidates for 3 open positions. HR sent me a stack of resumes to review beforehand. I skimmed through them during lunch, impressive degrees, solid experience, decent cover letters. Then I reached the last file. My heart stopped. The name at the top, Derek Miles. I read it again, certain I'd misread. But no. It was him. Same education timeline. Same previous employer I vaguely remembered him mentioning. He'd applied to my firm. To my team. I sat frozen, staring at his resume. 4 years of experience in digital marketing. Skills in campaign strategy and analytics. A polite cover letter expressing enthusiasm about joining Catalyst Global. No mention of knowing anyone here. No mention of me. My hands trembled slightly. I set the paper down and took a slow breath. 3 years. 3 years since he'd called me too ambitious and walked away. Now he wanted to work under my leadership. The irony was almost poetic. Part of me wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to throw his resume in the trash. But I didn't do either. Instead, I closed the file and walked to Victor's office. I knocked lightly. He waved me in. "Victor, I need to disclose something," I said calmly. "One of the candidates, Derek Miles, is my ex-boyfriend. We dated in college. It ended 3 years ago." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Any conflict of interest?" I shook my head. "No. But I wanted you to know before the interview process begins." Victor nodded thoughtfully. "Appreciate the transparency, Maya. We'll handle it professionally. If he's qualified, we'll consider him fairly. If not, we won't." I thanked him and left. Back at my desk, I opened Derek's file again. I studied his experience objectively, separating emotion from evaluation. He had decent credentials. Not outstanding, but solid enough to warrant an interview. I could have rejected him outright. No one would have questioned it. But that felt petty. Unprofessional. I'd built my career on merit and integrity. I wasn't about to compromise that because of old wounds. So I added his name to the interview list. The first round would be conducted by HR. If he passed, he'd meet with me and 2 other team members. I told myself I could handle it. I'd faced boardrooms full of skeptical executives and hostile clients. I could face one ex-boyfriend. Still, that night, sleep didn't come easily. HR sent me the shortlist. Derek had made it through the first round. His interview was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. I'd be joined by 2 colleagues, Priya, a sharp analyst with a no-nonsense attitude, and Marcus, a senior consultant known for asking tough questions. We gathered in the conference room 10 minutes early. Priya flipped through Derek's file. "Looks decent," she said. "Marketing background could complement our client services division." Marcus nodded. "Let's see how he handles pressure." I said nothing, arranging my notes with careful precision. At exactly 2 p.m., the door opened. Derek walked in. He wore a charcoal suit and a nervous smile. His eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw recognition flash across his face. Shock. Maybe regret. He recovered quickly, extending his hand toward Marcus. "Derek Miles. Thank you for this opportunity." His voice was steady, professional. I watched him shake hands with Priya, then Marcus. Finally, he turned to me. "Maya," he said quietly, his hand outstretched. I shook it briefly, my expression neutral. "Derek. Please, have a seat." He sat across from us, adjusting his tie. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers gripped the armrest. Priya started with standard questions. Background, experience, why Catalyst Global? Derek answered smoothly, his marketing expertise evident. He talked about campaign metrics and brand positioning with confidence. Marcus asked about teamwork and conflict resolution. Derek responded well, citing examples from previous roles. Then it was my turn. I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm and clear. Derek, this role requires collaboration with senior leadership and adapting to high-pressure environments. Can you describe a time when you had to adjust your personal priorities to meet professional demands? The question hung in the air. His eyes flickered briefly, acknowledgement of the subtext. He cleared his throat. Absolutely. In my last role, I often worked late to meet tight deadlines, even when it conflicted with personal plans. I nodded, taking notes. And how did you balance those demands with maintaining relationships outside of work? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I learned that clear communication is essential. Setting boundaries while remaining committed to the work. Priya glanced at me curiously but said nothing. Marcus asked a follow-up about client management. The interview continued for another 20 minutes. Derek performed well, not exceptional, but competent. Professional. When we finished, I thanked him and said we'd be in touch within a week. He stood, shook our hands again, and left. The door closed behind him. Marcus exhaled. Solid candidate. A bit generic, but he'd fit the role. Priya agreed. Nothing outstanding, but nothing disqualifying either. They both looked at me. I kept my expression unreadable. Let's compare him to the other candidates and discuss Monday. They nodded, gathering their things. Alone in the conference room, I stared at Derek's resume. My pulse was steady. My mind clear. This wasn't about revenge. It was about standards. That weekend, I reviewed all 3 finalists. Derek was competent, but the other 2 had stronger portfolios. One had led a successful rebranding campaign for a Fortune 500 company. The other had a master's degree and bilingual skills we needed for international clients. Objectively, Derek ranked 3rd. On Monday, we held the decision meeting. Victor joined us this time. Priya presented her analysis. Candidate 1 has the most relevant experience. Candidate 2 brings language skills and advanced education. Candidate 3, Derek Miles, is solid but doesn't stand out. Marcus agreed. I'd recommend candidate 1 or 2. Victor looked at me. Maya, you've worked closest with this division. What's your take? I met his gaze evenly. I agree with Priya and Marcus. Derek is qualified, but the other candidates bring more value to the team. I recommend we extend offers to candidates 1 and 2. Victor nodded. Done. Send the rejections professionally. I thanked them and returned to my desk. HR drafted the rejection emails that afternoon. Derek's rejection letter was polite and standard. Thank you for your interest in Catalyst Global. While your qualifications are strong, we've decided to move forward with other candidates whose experience more closely aligns with our current needs. We wish you success in your future endeavors. I reviewed it once, approved it, and watched it send. No guilt. No satisfaction. Just closure. That evening, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Maya, it's Derek. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I blocked the number. 2 days later, an email arrived in my work inbox. Subject, a conversation. I opened it reluctantly. Maya, I know this is unprofessional, but I needed to reach you. Seeing you in that interview, I realized how much I messed up 3 years ago. You were never too ambitious. I was too insecure. I'm sorry. I'm not asking for another chance. Just forgiveness. Derek, I read it twice. Then I closed the email and archived it. Some apologies come too late. Some bridges burn completely. Weeks passed. Work consumed me in the best way. We landed a major client, a tech startup looking to expand into European markets. I led the strategy team, coordinating across departments and time zones. Late nights became normal again, but this time I didn't resent them. I was building something meaningful. One evening, Priya and I grabbed dinner after a long presentation. Over pasta and wine, she asked casually, So, that candidate, Derek. You two had history, right? I paused mid-bite. Why do you ask? She shrugged. Just a vibe during the interview. The way he looked at you. The way you asked that question about balancing priorities. I set down my fork. We dated in college. He ended it because he thought I prioritized work over him. Priya's eyes widened. And then he applied to work under you. That's either brave or stupid. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. Maybe both. She raised her glass. Well, you handled it like a professional. Respect. We clinked glasses, and I felt lighter than I had in months. 6 months later, I was promoted again, this time to senior team lead with equity options. My mother cried for the 3rd time when I told her. My apartment got an upgrade, better view, bigger space, a home office I actually loved. I started mentoring junior analysts, sharing the lessons I'd learned through late nights and tough clients. One was a young woman named Keisha, brilliant but anxious about making mistakes. I told her what no one had told me early on. Ambition isn't a flaw. It's a direction. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. She nodded, her eyes reflecting the same hunger I'd once felt. Meanwhile, Catalyst Global expanded rapidly. We opened offices in 3 new cities. Victor hinted I might be considered for partner track within 2 years if I kept performing. I worked harder than ever, but I also started saying no to projects that didn't align with my goals. I set boundaries. I took weekends off occasionally. I even went on a few dates, nothing serious, but enough to remind myself I was more than my job title. One afternoon, I received a LinkedIn message. It was from Derek. Hi Maya. I wanted to reach out and congratulate you on your promotion. I saw the announcement. You've achieved everything you set out to do. I'm genuinely happy for you. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on how things ended between us, and I realize now how wrong I was. You were never the problem. I was. I hope you're well. Derek. I read it 3 times. His words sounded sincere, but they also felt like too little, too late. I drafted a response, then deleted it. Drafted another, deleted again. Finally, I closed the message without replying. Some chapters don't need epilogues. Some people don't deserve your energy, even in forgiveness. I logged off, grabbed my coat, and headed to a networking event downtown. Life moved forward, with or without closure. I chose forward. A year later, I was invited to speak at my alma mater's career week. The auditorium was packed with students hungry for advice on breaking into competitive industries. I stood at the podium, looking out at faces that reminded me of my younger self, eager, nervous, determined. I talked about resilience, strategy, and the importance of betting on yourself. Then someone asked, how do you balance ambition with personal relationships? The room went quiet. I thought about Derek. About the coffee shop. About the years I'd spent proving him wrong without even trying. I smiled. Ambition isn't something you balance. It's something you integrate. The right people will support your goals, not resent them. And if someone tells you you're too ambitious, believe them. Then find someone who isn't intimidated by your dreams. The audience erupted in applause. Afterward, several students approached me with questions and gratitude. One young woman hugged me and whispered, I needed to hear that. I hugged her back, feeling a deep sense of purpose. That night, I walked through the city alone, hands in my coat pockets, breath visible in the cold air. The skyline glittered against the dark sky, thousands of lights representing thousands of stories. Mine was just one among many, but it felt significant. I thought about the girl who'd sat in that coffee shop 3 years ago, absorbing the sting of rejection. She'd survived. More than that, she'd thrived. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my mother's contact. I called her. Hey, Mom. Maya. Everything okay? Her voice was warm, concerned. Yeah, everything's good. I just wanted to say thank you. For what, sweetheart? I smiled, watching a couple walk past holding hands. For teaching me that I didn't need anyone's permission to be extraordinary. She was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed softly, her voice thick with emotion. You never did, baby. You never did. We talked for 20 minutes, about nothing and everything. When I hung up, I felt whole. 2 months later, Catalyst Global announced its annual awards ceremony. I was nominated for the Excellence in Leadership Award, a recognition given to one team lead per year. The ceremony was formal, held at a downtown hotel with crystal chandeliers and champagne. I wore a burgundy dress and sat at a table with Priya, Marcus, and Victor. When they called my name as the winner, the room erupted in applause. I walked to the stage, shook hands with the CEO, and accepted a glass plaque engraved with my name. At the microphone, I thanked my team, my mentors, and my mother. Then I paused. 3 years ago, someone told me I was too ambitious. At the time, it felt like an insult. But I've learned that ambition isn't something to apologize for. It's something to harness. To the young professionals here tonight, don't shrink yourself to fit someone else's comfort. Build the life you want, unapologetically. The applause was deafening. Victor stood, clapping with pride. Priya wiped her eyes. I left the stage feeling vindicated, not by revenge, but by becoming exactly who I was meant to be. Months turned into another year. I continued climbing, leading projects that shaped industries and influenced markets. My work took me to conferences in Singapore, London, and Sao Paulo. I shook hands with CEOs and government officials. I made decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions in revenue. But I also learned to rest, to laugh with friends over brunch, to visit my mother more often, to water my plants and read books that had nothing to do with business. Balance wasn't about splitting time evenly, it was about living fully in each moment. One evening, I attended a charity gala supporting women in business. The event was elegant, filled with successful professionals and inspiring stories. During the networking hour, a woman approached me. She was older, maybe 50, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Maya, right? I heard your speech at the university last year. My daughter was there. Your words changed her perspective on her career path. I smiled. I'm glad I could help. She squeezed my hand gently. You're doing more than you realize. Keep going. That conversation stayed with me. I realized my journey wasn't just about personal success, it was about paving paths for others. I started a mentorship program at Catalyst Global, pairing senior staff with junior analysts. I wrote articles for industry publications about workplace dynamics and professional growth. I donated to scholarships for women pursuing business degrees. My impact extended beyond spreadsheets and boardrooms. It became about legacy. One afternoon, while organizing files, I found an old photo tucked in a drawer, Derek and me at graduation, smiling like we had the world figured out. I stared at it for a moment, feeling neither anger nor longing, just distance. I smiled faintly and placed the photo in a box labeled archive. Some memories deserved acknowledgement, not space. I closed the box, filed it away, and returned to my desk. Outside my window, the city hummed with life. Somewhere in it, Derek was living his own story. I hoped he'd found peace. I knew I had. Victor retired the following spring. At his farewell party, he pulled me aside. Maya, you've exceeded every expectation I had. You're going to run this place someday. I laughed. That's ambitious. He grinned. Exactly. A month later, I was offered a position on the partner track, the youngest candidate in firm history. The promotion came with increased responsibility, a significant salary bump, and a corner office overlooking the river. I accepted without hesitation. My mother flew in for the celebration dinner. Over steak and wine, she raised her glass. To my daughter, who never stopped believing in herself. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling tears prick my eyes. To you, Mom, for teaching me how. That night, back in my apartment, I stood by the window and looked out at the city lights. 3 years ago, I'd been called too ambitious by someone who couldn't keep up. Now, I was building empires. The irony tasted sweeter than any revenge ever could. Any quiet Sunday morning, I received a notification. Derek had gotten engaged. The announcement appeared on social media, him and a woman named Claire, smiling on a beach somewhere tropical. I studied the photo for a moment. He looked happy, older, different. I felt nothing but indifference. No bitterness. No jealousy. Just acknowledgement that we'd both moved on. I liked the post out of courtesy, then kept scrolling. Later that day, I met Keisha for coffee. She'd just been promoted to junior analyst and wanted advice on navigating her new responsibilities. We talked strategy, client management, and office politics. At one point, she asked, "Do you ever regret focusing so much on your career? Like, missing out on relationships or experiences?" I thought carefully before answering. I don't regret choosing myself. The right relationships enhance your life, they don't require you to shrink it. She nodded slowly, absorbing the words. That makes sense. I smiled. You'll figure out your own balance. Just don't apologize for wanting more. A few months later, I was invited to keynote a national business summit. The topic, Redefining Ambition in Modern Leadership. I spent weeks preparing, crafting a speech that wove personal experience with professional insight. The day of the summit, I stood backstage, listening to the hum of 1,000 attendees. My heart raced, but my mind was clear. When they called my name, I walked onto the stage with confidence. The spotlight was bright, the audience attentive. I told my story, the breakup, the rejection, the climb. I talked about being called too ambitious and how I turned that criticism into fuel. I spoke about building success without apology and creating space for others to do the same. The applause at the end was thunderous. People stood. Cameras flashed. Afterward, dozens approached me with gratitude, questions, and their own stories of resilience. I listened to each one, offering encouragement and connection. That night, flying home, I looked out the airplane window at the clouds below. I'd turned pain into purpose, rejection into reinvention. I'd become the woman I always knew I could be. 3 years after Derek walked into my interview, I sat in my corner office reviewing quarterly reports. The sun streamed through the windows, casting golden light across my desk. My phone buzzed, a message from my mother. Proud of you every single day. I smiled and texted back a heart. Outside, the city buzzed with ambition, dreams, and people chasing their own definitions of success. I was one of them, no longer proving anything to anyone but myself. Derek had called me too ambitious once, like it was a flaw. He'd walked away because my dreams felt too big for his comfort. But I hadn't shrunk. I'd expanded. I'd built a career that mattered, a life I loved, and a legacy that would outlast any relationship. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about confrontation, it's about transformation. I didn't need to ruin Derek's chances or gloat over his rejection. I just needed to keep building. And I did. 3 years later, he'd applied to work under my leadership. I'd evaluated him fairly and moved forward without him. Not out of spite, but out of standards. That was enough. I closed my laptop, grabbed my coat, and headed home. The elevator doors closed behind me, and I caught my reflection in the polished metal.